Just imagine this. It's late, you're alone, low lights are on, and you pop a bottle of stamped champagne. You take a slow sip and think, that's it? For something so pricey, it feels weirdly forgettable. You're not crazy. In the US, champagne is more flexible than flavor. Today we're ranking 10 famous champagnes from worst to best. No hype, just pure pleasure. Second-class energy only. 10. Cooks. For something to be called real champagne, it has to come from France and follow a strict rulebook, including being made using the méthode champenoise, also known as the traditional method. That's the gold standard, and it's non-negotiable. But even though France owns the name, American winemakers, especially in California, have been doing their own version of champagne since the 1860s. That created a long, messy fight between the US and France over naming rights, and after almost a century of back and forth, the US finally agreed in 2005 to stop calling most sparkling wines champagne. The only exception? Producers who were already using the name before 2006. Cook's California Champagne slipped through that loophole, and because of that, it still proudly wears the champagne label. According to the brand itself, Cook's claims to be the first American champagne ever made, which gives it some historical clout, even if the flavor doesn't quite live up to the legacy. Cook's Brut in particular has become a staple at brunch tables, bridal showers, and mimosa bars, mostly because it's cheap, accessible, and easy to mix. Now, Brut is supposed to mean dry, or at least not sweet, because technically it should contain less than 12 grams of sugar per liter. Traditional Brut champagne also isn't meant to be fruit-heavy, but Cook's Brut doesn't really follow that script. Instead, it leans hard into sweetness, almost like it forgot what Brut was supposed to be in the first place. Sommelier Patrick Cappiello once put Cook's through a blind tasting of low-cost sparkling wines, and even though he avoided outright trashing it, his description said plenty. He called it aggressively bubbly and noticeably sweet, which is not exactly a compliment in champagne circles. Because of that, Cook's ends up feeling simple, loud, and one note. It works if your goal is mimosas or a crowd that doesn't care much about nuance. But if you're actually sipping it straight, the experience fades fast. So while it has history on its side, Cook's lands firmly at the bottom of the list. 9. Andre. Andre California Champagne has been around since 1966, and its entire personality is built around celebration without pretense. It's loud, cheap, and fully aware of what it is. Like Cook's, Andre also dodged the champagne naming ban, so it still uses the term even though it wouldn't qualify by French standards. If you dig into Andre's own branding, it almost feels like they're winking at you. The company openly markets itself as the bottle you grab when you're getting messy at brunch, tailgating, or showing up to an ugly sweater party. The bottled version still calls itself naturally fermented, but interestingly, the canned version drops the champagne fantasy altogether and labels itself carbonated wine, which is probably the most honest move it could make. Taste-wise, Andre sits right where you'd expect. Comparisons done by the Village Voice found it sweet and slightly acrid, although not completely offensive. That sums it up pretty well. It's not great, but it's not undrinkable either. Savory reviews even gave it some credit for decent color, manageable bubbles, and a smoothness that makes it easy to drink quickly, even though it doesn't offer much excitement. One of Andre's most iconic features is the twist-off cap, which makes it perfect for bouncing from party to party because you can reseal it and keep moving. But even fans admit that it's better to pour Andre discreetly. Some reviewers suggest serving it in the kitchen or hiding the bottle in a towel, so guests don't immediately clock what they're drinking. That pretty much tells you everything you need to know. Andre is functional, fun in the right setting, but not something you linger over. 8. Korbel. Korbel likes to dress itself up as something more refined than it really is, and that's where things start to get questionable. Since Ronald Reagan's inauguration in 1985, Korbel has been poured at multiple presidential celebrations, which gives it a patriotic glow. And because it costs a few dollars more than Cook's or Andre, people often assume it must be classier. But that assumption doesn't really hold up. Korbel's biggest controversy comes from its use of the term méthode champenoise. According to Patrick Cappiello, that label is straight up misleading. The traditional champagne method is expensive and time-consuming, which is why true champagne costs what it does. It's also illegal to use that term outside of the Champagne region in France, which makes Corbel's labeling feel especially shady. When Cappiello blind tasted Corbel, he immediately noticed something off about the bubbles. They felt unnatural, almost like the wine had been force carbonated instead of naturally fermented. He also picked up strong candy notes and sharp acidity, which made the wine feel unbalanced. Savory reviews echoed those complaints, pointing out a bitter aftertaste that lingered longer than it should. In fact, they ranked Corbel lower than both Cook's and André, calling it the Atlantic City of Champagne. That comparison fits because Corbel looks flashy from a distance, but once you get closer, the cracks start to show. It tries hard to project prestige, but the taste doesn't quite back it up. 7. Barefoot Bubbly. Barefoot Wines is everywhere, and that familiarity has helped it rack up a serious pile of awards over the years. The brand even claims to be the most awarded wine brand in the world, and Barefoot Bubbly has benefited from that reputation. What Barefoot does better than many competitors is honesty. The label clearly states that what's inside the bottle is California sparkling wine, not traditional champagne. Even though it's still loosely acceptable to call it champagne in the US, Barefoot makes no effort to pretend it's something it's not. Instead of the traditional bottle fermentation method, Barefoot uses the Charmat process, where the second fermentation happens in large pressurized tanks. This method is faster and cheaper, usually taking a few weeks rather than years. Barefoot Bubbly currently offers 9 different sparkling wines, and about half of them lean heavily toward sweetness. That said, not all of them are sugar bombs. Wine enthusiasts gave the Brut Cuvée Chardonnay an impressive 88 points, praising its crisp texture, clean finish, and fine bubbles. Other reviewers weren't as enthusiastic about that one, but they found real charm in Barefoot's Pinot Grigio sparkling wine. Considering the price, usually under $10, Barefoot Bubbly delivers solid value. It's not complex, and it won't fool anyone into thinking it's high-end champagne, but if you can handle a bit of sweetness, it's one of the better cheap options out there. 6. Piper Heidsieck. Piper Heidsieck brings real champagne credentials to the table, and it does so with a heavy dose of glamour. According to pop culture lore, Marilyn Monroe kept bottles of Piper Heidsieck on hand for whenever she needed a boost. That star power hasn't faded either, because Piper Heidsieck is still the official champagne of the Academy Awards and regularly shows up at major film festivals. The brand leans into seduction and luxury in its marketing, but it also has the history to back it up. Piper Heidsieck is one of France's oldest champagne houses, dating back to the late 18th century. Legend has it that Marie Antoinette herself helped put the brand on the map, which adds to its old-world appeal. Its signature Cuvée Brut is a classic blend of Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay, and critics consistently score it in the 90-point range. Even better, it's surprisingly affordable for a true champagne. The flavor is crisp, clean, and balanced, making it an easy recommendation for people who want authenticity without completely wrecking their budget. 5. Moet and Chandon. Moet and Chandon is one of the most recognizable names in Champagne, and for good reason. It has been favored by everyone from Napoleon Bonaparte to Queen Elizabeth II, and today it stands as the largest champagne producer in the world. With roughly 28 million bottles made each year, Moet is a global powerhouse. Founded in 1743, the brand helped introduce champagne to the wider world, especially under the leadership of Jean-Remy Moet. There's even a legend that Napoleon's troops invented the tradition of sabering champagne bottles during celebrations. Moet's flagship Brut Imperial is aged just long enough to meet legal requirements, resulting in a crowd-pleasing profile that's smooth, lightly sweet, and easy to enjoy. It's not the most complex champagne out there, but it's consistent, approachable, and undeniably polished, which earns it a solid spot in the middle of the countdown. 4. Bollinger. If it weren't for the cult British sitcom Absolutely Fabulous, there's a good chance Bollinger wouldn't be as deeply lodged in pop culture as it is today. Before Idina and Patsy made getting recklessly tipsy on Bolly part of their personality, Bollinger had a reputation for being a little too buttoned up and snobbish. It was the kind of champagne people respected, but didn't necessarily feel relaxed ordering, because it carried that intimidating, old money energy. But once Ab Fab turned it into a punchline and a party drink, the brand suddenly felt rebellious, ironic, and oddly cool, even though nothing about the liquid itself had changed. Because of that exposure, Bollinger leaned hard into the fame. It became recognizable far beyond wine circles, but that also came with a problem. The price tag was still high, and now people were asking whether the champagne actually justified it. According to industry chatter at the time, Bollinger struggled a bit to explain why it cost what it did, especially when newer, flashier labels were grabbing attention. So the house did what many legacy brands eventually do. It hired serious PR muscle to steer the narrative back toward craftsmanship, history, and quality instead of sitcom jokes. Although pop culture helped, Bollinger didn't rely on nostalgia alone. The brand has been around since 1829, which means it's survived wars, depressions, changing tastes, and shifting trends without selling out to a corporate giant. It remains one of the few family-run champagne houses in France, and that independence shows in the wine. Bollinger champagnes tend to be rich, structured, and mature, with a savory depth that feels intentional rather than trendy. They're not sugary crowd pleasers, but they reward patience and attention. Wine critics often point out that Bollinger leans heavily on Pinot Noir, which gives it champagne muscle and seriousness. The special Cuvée Brut, in particular, gets praised for its complexity because the fermentation process brings out layers instead of just bubbles. You'll notice baked apple, butter, and even a whisper of hazelnut, which makes it feel more like food than a party prop. But that savory edge can surprise people expecting something light and playful. Bollinger isn't trying to charm everyone, and that's exactly why it lands at number 4. It's gorgeous, but not universally lovable. 3. Veuve Clicquot. Veuve Clicquot isn't just a champagne brand, it's a story of stubborn ambition and sharp business instincts. When Madame Clicquot took over her late husband's champagne house in the early 1800s, women weren't exactly encouraged to run empires. But she didn't hesitate. Instead, she refined production, expanded distribution, and completely reshaped how champagne was made. She even created the first rosé champagne, which at the time was a bold move rather than a safe bet. Because of her drive, Veuve Clicquot became international long before global branding was common. Madame Clicquot famously wanted her champagne known everywhere, from New York to St. Petersburg, and she got her wish. Even today, the brand still feels guided by that original vision. It's polished, confident, and unapologetically visible. For many people, Veuve is the champagne they recognize first, and that familiarity comes from generations of consistency. That loyalty can border on obsession. In one famous case, a collector paid tens of thousands of dollars for a nearly 200-year-old bottle recovered from a shipwreck. The idea that someone would spend that much money on a bottle from Madame Clicquot's era says a lot about how deeply this champagne resonates with fans. It's not just about taste, it's about history you can drink. But Veuve Clicquot also holds up in the glass. The signature yellow label Brut is widely praised for its energetic bubbles and balanced personality. You get notes of stone fruit, citrus, cream, and toasted bread, all playing nicely together without one overpowering the others. There's a smooth richness, but it finishes with a crisp, apple-like snap that keeps it refreshing. Even though Veuve carries prestige, it's surprisingly accessible. You can find it almost anywhere. And if you're smart about timing, especially around holidays, it often goes on sale. That makes it a reliable choice for celebrations when you want something impressive without gambling on an unfamiliar bottle. Veuve Clicquot earns its number 3 spot because it manages to be historic, dependable, and genuinely enjoyable without feeling boring. 2. Taittinger. Taittinger feels different the moment you start learning about how it's made. One of the most striking details is where the champagne ages, deep inside ancient chalk caves beneath Reims. These caves were originally carved out by the Romans, forgotten, and then rediscovered centuries later. Because the temperature and humidity stay naturally stable, they turned out to be nearly perfect for aging champagne slowly and evenly. Although many champagne houses talk about tradition, Taitinger backs it up with practice. Except for a short interruption, the house has been family-run since the 1930s, and that continuity matters. Their philosophy focuses on balance, patience, and elegance rather than sheer power. The brand itself says the soul of the family business is what makes the champagne special, and judging by the scores, that's not just marketing talk. Critics consistently rate Taitinger highly, with some of its prestige bottles reaching the mid to high 90s. The top-tier releases can be expensive, but the brilliance of Taitinger is that even its more affordable bottles feel carefully made. The Brut La Française, for example, costs far less than the prestige cuvées, but still delivers depth and refinement. That richness comes from time. Taitinger ages even its entry-level champagne for about 4 years, which is longer than most houses bother with at that price point. As a result, the wine develops a creamy mouthfeel and layered flavors. You'll notice orchard fruit, citrus oils, and a subtle savory note that adds intrigue. It feels polished but not stiff, which makes it perfect for dinner parties or pre-dinner pours. So although Taitinger doesn't always shout for attention, it quietly outperforms many louder brands. It's elegant without being fragile and refined without being intimidating. That balance is why it lands at number 2, just shy of the top. 1. Dom Perignon. Dom Perignon might be the most recognizable champagne name on the planet, even among people who don't drink champagne often. Its reputation is built as much on symbolism as on flavor. Ordering Dom Perignon signals status, celebration, and importance, whether it's at a wedding, a milestone party, or a once-in-a-lifetime dinner. That image has been carefully cultivated over decades. But beneath the prestige, Dom Perignon is also unusually disciplined. It's a vintage-only champagne, meaning it's produced only when the harvest meets extremely high standards. If the grapes aren't good enough in a given year, Dom Perignon simply doesn't exist. That alone sets it apart from most brands, which blend across years to maintain consistency. The aging process is another defining factor. Dom Perignon rests for at least 7 years before release, and some vintages age far longer. That extended time allows the champagne to develop layers of flavor, texture, and aroma that feel expansive and slow-moving. It's not meant to be rushed. Of course, the price invites scrutiny. Critics often debate whether Dom Perignon is worth it, and opinions vary depending on the vintage. Some experts argue that certain years shine brighter than others, while others find consistency across decades. Tastings of multiple vintages reveal that even when one year underperforms slightly, the overall experience remains impressive. Dom Perignon isn't designed for casual sipping. It's a champagne that asks for a reason, a moment, and a bit of attention. But when the occasion is right, it delivers something few others can: a sense of ceremony paired with genuine craftsmanship. That combination of restraint, quality, and myth-making is why Dom Perignon takes the top spot. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.